The businessman had everything most people dreamed of. His home was a towering glass structure, filled with polished furniture and expensive art that caught the light like trophies of success. His days were scheduled down to the minute, his phone buzzing constantly with meetings, contracts, and deals. Yet in the quiet of the night, when the city outside finally dimmed, he often lay awake staring at the ceiling, restless and hollow. His wealth had given him security, but not peace. The emptiness felt heavier than the gold watch wrapped around his wrist. He often wondered when life had become a checklist: churn more, buy more, achieve more. Each success came with a moment of triumph, but it never lasted. The satisfaction slipped away quickly, leaving him hungry for the next target. It was like drinking salt water. The more he consumed, the thirstier he became. People envied him, but deep down he envied those who seemed content, without needing to run endlessly after something. One evening, after another exhausting day of negotiations that ended with him signing a deal worth millions, he decided to take a walk by the harbor near his hotel. The air smelled of salt and carried a softness that his office's air-conditioned chill never had. As he strolled past the rows of boats, his eyes caught sight of a small wooden one tied loosely to the dock. Around him were two small children, clapping and laughing as he sang. Their laughter rose into the evening air like birds set free, unburdened, light. The businessman stopped. He couldn't remember the last time he had heard laughter that pure, not even in his own home. His children, grown and busy, barely called anymore. His wife, once his partner in dreams, now lived in another city, tired of a marriage that revolved around work rather than love. The sight of that fisherman, carefree with nothing but his children and a song, felt like a quiet wound opening inside him. He looked down at his polished shoes, the ones he had bought in Italy on a whim, and felt their weight pressing him further into the ground. What was the use of these shoes if they never walked him anywhere meaningful? He had everything. Yet, in that moment, watching the fisherman, he felt poorer than he ever had before. Something within him stirred a curiosity, maybe even longing. He didn't know why, but he wanted to speak to the fisherman. There was something in that laughter, in the rhythm of that song, that drew him closer, as though it carried an answer he had been searching for all along. The next morning, the businessman returned to the harbor. The memory of the fisherman's laughter had stayed with him through the night, soft but persistent, like a melody he could not shake off. He found the man again, this time repairing his nets, his hands rough yet graceful in their work. The two children from before were nearby, skipping stones across the water, their giggles rising with every splash. The businessman approached, unsure how to begin. The fisherman looked up and greeted him with a smile so effortless it disarmed him. There was no hint of calculation, no expectation of gain, just a quiet openness. The businessman introduced himself, and after a short pause, he asked why the fisherman was not out at sea, working to catch more fish. The fisherman laughed gently, a sound without bitterness. He explained that he had already caught enough in the morning to feed his family for the day. The rest of the time, he said, belonged to life itself, playing with his children, singing songs, watching the sea shift its colors under the sun. Why chase more when what he had was enough? The words unsettled the businessman. Enough. It was a word he rarely used. For him, there was always another deal, another expansion, another step upward. Enough had never been part of his vocabulary. He pressed further, asking if the fisherman never worried about the future, about what would happen if one day he had less. The fisherman shrugged, his eyes calm. Tomorrow would bring what it would, he said, and he would meet it as it came. The businessman felt a twinge of irritation mixed with envy. He had built his entire life around control, around bending the future to his will through endless planning and labor. And here was this man, content to simply exist in the rhythm of the day, trusting that it would be enough. It seemed irresponsible, even foolish, and yet it also seemed free. The conversation was interrupted by the children, who pulled their father's sleeve, asking him to sing again. He set down his net and began a tune, clapping along with them. His voice was simple, not polished or trained, but it carried warmth that seemed to wrap around them all. The businessman watched in silence. The scene was small, ordinary even, but it stirred something deep inside him. He thought of his own children again, the way they had once tugged at his arm to play, and how often he had pushed them away with the excuse of being too busy. As the fisherman sang, the businessman felt a strange tightness in his chest. He realized he had no song. His life had been built around noise meetings, deadlines, numbers, but never music. And in that moment, listening to the fisherman, he felt the sharp edge of what he had missed. The day stretched on as the businessman lingered by the harbor, unable to tear himself away from the fisherman's quiet world. At first, he told himself it was curiosity, perhaps even research into why someone would choose to live so simply. But as the hours passed, he realized it was something more. He was searching for himself in the reflection of this man's life. The fisherman invited him to share a simple meal: grilled fish, seasoned with salt, a slice of bread, and water drawn from a clay jug. There was nothing fancy about it, no fine wine or imported delicacies, yet the taste surprised the businessman. It was fresh, unpretentious, and oddly satisfying. As they ate, the children told stories that made their father laugh until his shoulders shook. The businessman joined in, awkward at first, but then freer, as though a weight he had carried was loosening bit by bit. In between their laughter, silence came easily. The fisherman seemed in no rush to fill every moment with words, and that silence felt strange yet soothing to the businessman, whose world was always filled with constant noise. For the first time in years, he felt no urge to check his phone, no need to prove himself through numbers and deals. He simply sat, present, and breathed in the sea air. As the sun lowered toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet, the businessman felt a realization settle over him. All his wealth, all his possessions, had never given him what this fisherman possessed: peace. It was not about having less or more, but about knowing when enough was truly enough. He had mistaken abundance for happiness, yet happiness had been sitting quietly, waiting in the spaces of life he had ignored. Before leaving, he thanked the fisherman. The man only smiled, saying nothing profound, as though he hadn't done anything unusual. But for the businessman, it was everything. On his walk back, he noticed how different the city looked. The lights no longer glittered as promises, but flickered like distractions. The weight of his watch, his suit, his polished shoes, all felt unnecessary. They were no longer symbols of achievement, but reminders of how much time he had traded away for things that did not matter. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought not of deals or deadlines, but of the fisherman's song and his children's laughter. He promised himself that when morning came, he would call his own children, not to discuss business or obligations, but simply to ask how they were. For the first time in a long time, he felt the stirrings of something gentle in his chest, perhaps the beginning of peace, perhaps the rediscovery of a song he had forgotten. In the end, the story of the fisherman and the businessman reminds us that happiness is not measured by the weight of possessions, but by the lightness of the heart. Wealth can build walls, but simplicity opens doors to love, to presence, to peace. When we learn to say enough, we discover that life already holds what we've been chasing. Perhaps it is time to pause, to listen for our own forgotten songs, and to live with gratitude for what is here today. If this story touched you, share it with someone, leave a thought below, and subscribe for more gentle reflections.